Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Remaker's Mark. Here we are in the third episode of our What's Up Doc series, where we are discussing My Kid Could Paint That, Mark's Choice. With me, as always, are my friends Andy Wicks, Jeremy Nelson, Lee How the Heck Is That Art, and Mark Joesting. As usual, I want to check in to see what everybody knew about this movie and this subject. So again, the film is My Kid Could Paint That, a documentary that focuses on modern art made by a 4-year-old, ? Ooh, scandal, we'll see. Andy Wicks, did you know much about this movie or this subject ahead of time?
When Mark told us that we were going to watch this, I maybe had the faintest glimmer of recognition of the title. Then as I was watching it, I was like, oh yeah, I think I kind of remember hearing this news story when it happened, which would have been back in 2004, 2005, I think. The movie came out in 2007. So yeah, I might have some awareness of it at the time, but hadn't probably thought about it in 15 years.
Fair enough. That's a good latency period. I like that. Jeremy, how about you? What did you know about this movie and subject?
Hello, Kyle.
Hello.
I knew nothing about the documentary itself, and my knowledge of modern art begins and ends at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. I go there occasionally.
That's a good place to start and end.
Yeah, it's one of the museums here in town, and I have gone there, I don't know, once a year or once every other year or so, and I am fascinated by the things that are there, but ultimately don't understand most of them.
That's just fine. We won't hold that against you, unless you want us to. Lee, how about you? What did you know about this movie and or subject ahead of time?
Well, I had never heard of it, the documentary, but when I started watching it, I had a vague recollection of the news story when it aired back in 2004. I think like on the modern, or not modern, but morning news, just about some child prodigy painter somewhere, and that her paintings were going for large amounts of money, but that's all I really remember about it. But just watched the documentary today.
Gotcha. Very good. And Mark, how about you? Did you know much about this subject and or film ahead of time?
In fact, I had seen the film before.
Okay.
I showed parts of this film to my class when I taught art, and it was largely in the context of aesthetic philosophy and the question of what is art. But I have experience with the film, with the news story, and with the subject matter.
Right on. This was your choice. So, do you have any comments as to why you chose this before we dig into it, aside from it being used in a classroom before?
It was mostly because it was already there for me. It was familiar, and I'm not a huge documentary watcher, to the point where I can't say documentary properly.
Is this what's been holding you back this entire time?
Yeah, that's really the crux of it.
All right.
Yeah. No, I just haven't seen a lot of documentaries, and this one was right there in the chamber.
Well, we are certainly working to cure that a little bit and get some new movies up in your business.
Yeah, and I'm glad.
Excellent. Happy to hear it. So there are a few things that we want to talk about. First is whether this movie, as a film or a documentary that focuses on a 4-year-old, is in the realm of exploration or in the realm of exploitation. So to give just a little bit more detailed summary of the plot of this, which will inform what we talk about going forward. Ultimately, the movie, the documentary, is about a 4-year-old who basically makes modern art paintings, I guess, if you will. I mean, modern art could be lots of things, but makes paintings that all of a sudden take off in the modern art world and are sold for thousands upon thousands of dollars. And there is lots of press attention to this. And I don't know how the documentarian got the story or got the gig. Did you guys get that at all, as far as how he started working with them? Did he come, did they hire him before she got big? I never got a sense of that. Did anybody catch that?
I don't think they mention it in the film.
Okay.
But it sure seems like he followed up on the news story in a pretty fresh manner.
Yeah, so might have gotten an early glimpse before it was a really, really big deal, and then was able to capture a lot of that attention and noise and media. And so the film is about sort of two things. One, modern art, which is what is modern art, right? And we're definitely going to be talking about that in a little bit here. What does that look like? What does that feel like? What does that, what is legitimacy in that regard? If a 4-year-old can do it, the movie is called My Kid Could Paint That. And that's at the crux of it. So is this 4-year-old, channeling some inner 70-year-old master, or is she just a kid pushing paint around, right? So this definitely has a feeling of, given that you're working with kids, filming a 4-year-old, is this exploration of the material or is it exploitation? That to me was a very hard question to answer. And I don't know that there's a definitive answer, but I do know how frustrated and upset I felt in watching this. The note that I made in our pre-production document is that this made me feel more angry and more riled up than Hot Coffee did. And, Hot Coffee was at a societal level, right? I mean, that was as big as you can get, the struggles and the challenges and the things that are done wrong by people. This was very intimate. This was a very small picture, but it really, it just like pinched that nerve for me of seeing, a kid be exploited, whether it be by the documentary, by the parents, by the media, by the world at large. It really made me feel ooky. And I didn't think that was going to happen. I, as usual, when we're doing movies, I always ask Kate if she wants to watch it. And we watch the trailer. She's like, no, I'm not really interested. I don't think that'll make me feel good. I don't need that in my life right now. I was like, okay, that's fair. And I was like, I don't think I'll be that way. And then in watching it, like it just bubbled up inside me, like so intensely. Did any of you have a similar feeling to that or something that you want to kind of say about that?
Yes.
Oh, Andy, do tell.
I have spoken at least privately to the rest of the crew here. I'm not a big documentary guy. And I think a large part of that for me is they're kind of anxiety inducing, which is, and I think part of it happens to be that the documentaries that seem to get a lot of the press and attention are the ones that have the scandal or controversy or the really heart-wrenching stories. I mean, that's part of it is what attracts people to film in general. But because these are true stories that I don't know, there's something about it that's just hard for me to stomach with, my own mental health. That I know that it's not something that I need in my life, like Kate said.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I had a very similar reaction, and then watching Hot Coffee to me, because I was like, I don't really know. I mean, I'll get through it because I need to watch it. But I actually ended up really enjoying it because I found it very informative and something that I don't know. I was much more into that one. This one, like you said, Kyle, made me feel ooky because it was such a small, intimate story that I felt very much like a voyeur, like I shouldn't have been there. I didn't want to be there. And I didn't want anyone else who was watching, like all the camera crews. I just wanted them all to go away. And I just wanted this kid to just paint, just be a 4-year-old kid pushing paint around and being a 4-year-old kid. I was mad at her parents for doing what they did. And I was mad at everyone else who was just trying to get a piece of that. Even the ones who seemed like they had her best interest at heart. I was just like, no, just go away and let her be a kid. And I felt like I needed to go away as well.
Well, and I think that along with that, documentaries like Hot Coffee and another one that I mentioned in the Hot Coffee episode, The Corporation, and you get this sense, like Kyle said, of you can sort of get riled up and you can direct that anger at the systems. Like, oh, the systems suck. Like our judicial system sucks. The laws in this country suck, and just be mad about it and want to be like fired up about wanting to do something about it. But in a documentary like this, like there's nowhere to put any of those emotions. Because it's like, who are you mad at or upset at? Or like there isn't a way to direct it besides just feeling bad.
You could go paint.
I could go paint. I'm terrible at painting.
But abstract expressionism is perfect for this.
That's true. just like, am I mad at the parents? Am I mad at the people buying her art? Am I mad at the art gal? Like, I just didn't know how to feel about any of it, or who to sort of direct any of my feelings at. And at the end of the documentary, I still don't even know how I feel about the situation and
Yeah.
what happened.
There's a difference between having a righteous anger at a faceless system, like we got from Hot Coffee, than what this presented to us. I totally agree with you, Jer.
Well, I think it could be seen as a cautionary tale. Like, don't be this parent, don't be this kid, don't be this media, right? But I think it's not a failure, but a lacking of the documentary of getting to that point. And maybe it's just that the story is too ambiguous. You know, the story really does sort of morph and change a little bit, and we'll talk about that when we kind of discuss our thoughts of the documentary itself. But I think the best documentaries have a clear mission statement and then act upon that or film upon that. And this one had several. And I feel like because of that, it diluted the message, and in a way where everything then felt either too covered or not covered at the same time. You know what I mean? Like, it just felt off, and it felt really wrong and hard.
Agreed.
Andy, you made an interesting point about the grown-up, specifically the mother. Do you want to give a little bit of background of that and then expound upon that a little?
Yeah. I wrote in our production notes that I actually felt sympathy for the mother, because it was presented a little bit by, I think, the journalist from the newspaper journalist that followed them, that her impression was that the mom was kind of talked into a lot of this and was resistant to a lot of the attention. And in some of the video clips that we see of her, you hear her saying things like, oh, if this had ended with selling one painting or with not selling any paintings, it would have been maybe better. So I felt bad for her, because she seemed obviously like she was trying very hard to do right by her daughter, but it also didn't seem like she and her husband were always on the same page, that he seemed very much almost like an agent in a way. He was portrayed a little bit. I got a skeezy vibe from him. I don't know if anyone else got that, but
yeah.
I did too.
And he's made out to be kind of the bad guy by the 60 Minutes piece, which we'll maybe get to in a little bit. So he spends a lot of the time, and I think she does simply because she seems like a loyal spouse and mother, of defending him and defending their parenting by saying, no, we weren't actually helping her. We're trying to prove that we're not. But at the same time, like, she didn't put a stop to it. She could have put a stop to it at any point, and she didn't. So we're still seeing a very limited picture of all of the facts. We're only seeing one side of it. But yeah, I got that impression from her, that she seemed very put upon and just kind of had that stressed parent look for a lot of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, they even talk about it at one point in the documentary, where their schedules, the husband and wife, their schedules were opposite. And so they were making a lot of decisions in a vacuum from one another. And it seemed as though in how the documentary portrayed it, that a lot of that was falling to the husband. Yeah. That he was kind of doing a lot of that because of how their schedules worked. And so he was kind of, they framed it in such a way that they came together, they figured out, here are the parameters, here are the rules, here's the boundaries, make decisions within that. But it also appeared as though, or it seemed as though, those boundaries that they created weren't ones that she was overly thrilled with.
Yeah. It was a little bit of the stereotypical, we read a lot of Berenstain Bear books in our family right now, for good or bad, but it's my daughter's favorite things to read before bedtime. And these parents reminded me very much of the Berenstain Bear parents, whereas the mama bear is portrayed as the wise and cautious mother bear parent, and the papa bear is just a doofus who just makes things worse, puts his foot in the middle of everything, and it's while those books are caricatures, that was totally the vibe I got from these parents, and that she's trying to pump the brakes essentially, and he's trying to slam on the gas, and that tension seemed very unhealthy to me.
Well, and none of that helps the case that seems to be presented in the documentary of him being sort of the villain and affecting what things are happening. And so
Yeah.
it doesn't, all of that is built to make him seem like there's a lot of reasonable doubt as to whether or not this was Marla's, or whether or not this was Marla and him.
Yeah. And regardless, he's not presented as having a lot of empathy for his wife's feelings and perspectives.
For sure.
Right. Yeah, I think he sees it as a train that is barreling down the tracks that can't be either stopped or turned onto a different path. And all she sees is different paths and the comfort that those could bring. I felt so much empathy for her. I didn't feel empathy for them working together to get into this circumstance, but she had some very, sage and wise things. And, even in the thick of acknowledging that, what was successful could be no longer successful. She said, this was a happening. This happened. It can unhappen. Right. Like, it just acknowledging that, and the relief that she felt after the 60 minutes piece that we'll touch on. If I were in those shoes, I would feel that exact same thing. Like, oh my God, thank God it's over. Whereas the other parent was like, what can we do to overcome this? Right. How can we change the narrative? And I just felt just very strong feelings for her and wish that she could be out of that scenario. Mark, you had a final follow-up regarding Marla herself, the 4-year-old in the film. Can you tell us a little bit about Marla now?
Yeah, just to check in with Marla. Nowadays, she's about 20, and I was very happy to learn that she's still painting. There are lots of things that you might expect out of a child that goes through the events that are reported in this documentary, and you might expect that that they're scarred for life and would never touch a paintbrush again, or that they are desperately striving to keep up with that with the level of expectation. I don't get either sense from her. I mean, she's definitely painting, but it seems like she's studying with another painter and trying to shore up her representational work, which is the opposite of the non-representational stuff which all 4-year-olds do, and the stuff that made her famous. I was glad to learn that she's still doing it, and it seems like she's doing it with a humble attitude.
From what I read, she has not watched the documentary and won't, but she and her brother watched the trailer for the documentary and thought it was actually kind of funny.
Interesting.
And ridiculous.
Interesting.
Yeah, the family had let's say negative reactions to the documentary. I mean, if when you watch the whole thing, you might get that impression, but the parents refused to go see it at its opening, and the whole family probably still hasn't seen it.
The other thing that I thought was cool about her update is that there are still occasionally people asking for her paintings, or asking her to do more paintings to buy for obscene amounts of money, and they're basically just saying no. Like, they're that part is done, and they want her to, and she herself wants to just focus on being a regular person and not a celebrity of any kind. And so they have turned off that whole side of that story.
Sounds almost like a best case scenario in a lot of ways of coming out of something that could be pretty traumatic to a family and a kid and their upbringing. And that's really great to hear. I mean, I hope that continues, as things will probably come out in therapy well down the road. And that's great. I hope she embraces that and goes down that path, but that's really good to hear. We are going to talk about modern art. So, Mark, I'm going to call out here. You spoke very well with regards to art. You were a art major. At least one of your majors was art, correct?
Yeah, it turns out the other one was also art.
Interesting.
Yeah, I doubled in studio art and in aesthetic philosophy.
Oh, okay.
So making art and then the reasons that we make art.
And then education later.
And then art education.
Yes, indeed. Very good. So, Mark can speak very I think, clearly to art. The rest of us, a little bit less.
I was a FIAD major.
I love that so much. But we are going to give it a try here, right? And that's something that this movie tackles is, what is modern art? Is it a legitimate thing? Is it a real thing? Why does a Jackson Pollock piece where paint is splattered sell for $15 million and something that looks the same created by a 6-year-old not, right? Or in this case, a 4-year-old does sell like crazy. So it's a very interesting topic and one that we're going to touch on a little bit. Jer, why don't you start us off with that, if you don't mind?
With regards to the documentary, it took me in a very big journey that I was not expecting from this documentary, as far as how I was feeling as in relation to art itself and this family and this 4-year-old artist. And it went in very unexpected directions. But as far as its take on modern art, it also was a big journey for me. But ultimately, for me, who I have a lot less art degrees than Mark, and far fewer. And so I kind of ended full circle back at where I began, which is to say that I don't get modern art. Like I said at the beginning, I go to the Walker Art Museum and I see a humongous painting, a giant canvas that just has a big red dot on it. And I just don't get it. And I see a pile of TVs that are all just sort of flashing static. And I get that there's a point and I get that there's a message, but I don't get what it is. In some cases, I don't even get that there is a message. Or if it's just, like you said, when it's just seems to be entirely random. And I think one of my favorite parts of the documentary was when they were at the height of sort of the popularity of Marla, and all of these art buyers were talking about how great she is, and one of them was talking about, oh, she painted a little window up here, and there's a doorway, and a person looking out, and a person looking in, and up above them is this like fetus or whatever. And I asked Marla, like, why were you painting that? And she just said, oh, because she's Marla, and that's so hilarious. And, like, that speaks to so many different levels of how I feel about both art and people who the pretentiousness that can crop up within the circles of art. Not to say that that's all of it, especially modern art, because there are many styles of art that I find way more impactful emotionally than that. But that part just cracked me up because it hit the nail on the head as to how I feel about what modern art can end up being.
Now, Jared, I'm going to challenge you a little bit. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying.
No, challenge me all you want. Go ahead.
But I think because that guy was such a doofus. Look at this window that she painted. But I think anyone could say that about anybody who is a super big fan of anything.
Oh yeah.
So I think you could easily translate that experience to someone who is a huge fan of this one band, or is a huge fan of renovating cars, or
look at how people, fans, have dissected to the point of the minutia has minutia within the universe of Star Wars that there are, which we all love.
Hey, Jared, did you know that Droopy McCool's former boss had a nickname for him? Do you know what that nickname was?
No, I don't even remember.
It was a snit.
Yeah, that's
which is also the name of the small beer you get with a Bloody Mary.
But it's I get what you're saying. Like everybody, when you become so embroiled within your passion, you can find things that most people would see. Most people would look at it and go, yeah, that's not actually, like, I appreciate that, but George Lucas didn't actually put that thing in that one scene because it meant something. It was just like a prop. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
We are just as guilty as that art critic doofus.
Absolutely. We are as doofusy.
We are the pot calling the kettle black.
Well, and the art the gallery owner, excuse me, does not do modern art any favors in that he champions her work, which, like, good on him, I guess. I mean, it leaned a little bit more exploitation than exploration, if we're kind of breaking it down into that dichotomy. But he was enabling her work, her art, her money. There was financial gain for the family from that. But then, like, later on, he was like, well, it was all just a joke. And then, like, 3 minutes later in the documentary, so I'm sorry, let me rewind just a little bit. He's like, no, it was meant to cast an eye on the absurdity of modern art and make people that are big fans realize what a sham it is or whatever. And then, like, 3 minutes later, Marla comes back. He's like, great, come on into my gallery. Let's get this rolling. It just felt like,
yeah, if there's a villain in this movie, it was that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
He made a lot of money off of her.
Yeah.
Mark, given the expertise that you have here, I would love your thoughts on this, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I can actually address some of the problems that Jer mentioned, and
everybody listening, pay more attention to what Mark is saying than what I just said.
All right, so I will try to keep this short. I think the first thing to keep in mind is that we all have this tendency to assume that there's something to get, that there is a thing that you need to understand about art, and with a lot of modern art, there is this thing, and there's no way that you could get it just by looking. You need to read an artist statement. But the type of modern art that's being presented in this documentary, something called abstract expressionism. We need to clarify that it's not simply abstract, because really all art is abstract in one sense or another, and to varying degrees. But this work is non-representational. It is not a depiction of a thing. And that's where I think there's a misconnection, where people have this assumption that they are looking at a thing, just like the Marla art collector who read all this stuff into her work, saying that there was a door up in the corner and there's a baby curled up next to it. But what if it is purely visual? There is a thing that we call formalism, which is that you are just creating something that is just built out of the purest visual elements of art. It's just color, it's just shape, it's just lines and textures, and that's all that you need to respond to. This is the stuff that people love to hate, like Jackson Pollock with the splatter painting, Mark Rothko with the giant fields of color layered on top of each other, Helen Frankenthaler doing the same. Maybe most infuriating, Piet Mondrian doing just squares and rectangles, flat colors. Not even very many colors. It's like primaries and then black and white. So I think that's the thing to keep in mind, is that maybe there's nothing to get. Maybe it's just something you're supposed to look at. And maybe you feel things by looking at it, but it's not. But maybe you're not supposed to engage on an intellectual level.
And I think,
would you just say, like, don't read too much into it?
That's what I would say.
Agreed. I think the human mind instinctually wants to connect dots, and sometimes there just aren't dots to connect. Yeah,
I agree. Like there's an area of psychology dedicated specifically to that, called Gestalt psychology, where we wanna fill in gaps, and indeed that's how we operate and make our way through a lot of things. Like you you don't hear a sentence so well when somebody says it, but you can kind of piece together a meaning based on things that you have heard. Or, by looking at things, I see an organic shape in various shades of brown color, and it's getting rapidly larger. I interpret that as a bear charging at me. It happens all the time.
Especially with bears.
The two pieces that they showed in the documentary where they actually recorded her making them, the one called Ocean, I think.
Yep.
And I forget what the other one was called, but the one from the 60 Minutes piece. Those two I didn't care for at all. But there were several other ones. I don't remember the names of them. One was very much black and reds that almost looked like flames or something like that. There were a couple other ones that looked like she was painting with a lot of just little circles or swirls. They were very captivating, and they were things that I would own. I would have hanging up. Mark, I don't know if you're familiar with an artist here locally named Mary Frances Judge.
I'm not.
Okay. She lives here in my building. I live in an artist loft, and she does a lot of very similar styled abstract work with very vibrant colors, and often in on circular canvases. I actually have one in my house that she was throwing away. And I found it by the dumpsters because she was just getting rid of stuff. And so I grabbed it and I have it. But she's a pretty prolific artist that has been around since the 70s and has done gallery shows in Paris and all over the place. But there were numerous paintings that Marla did that I really liked. Not because I saw any sort of meaning in them, just because the way that the colors and the way that the way that the painting itself looked, I connected with. I enjoyed. I had a response to, and I think that ultimately is where, for me, where art connects is when it's an emotional connection, and it doesn't have to mean something. But I have a difficulty connecting to art that I don't understand, where it's a red dot on a white canvas. That doesn't connect with me emotionally. But when I see something that is as equally abstract, it's just colors in a field, but the colors are the mixed and blended in such a way and evoke some type of response in me, then that's when I connect with them.
Jer, you're responding to it because it's aesthetically pleasing, and not because there's a different meaning attached to it, which is what kind of annoyed me about some of the people in this documentary. Like they weren't paying for the art itself; they were paying for the novelty that it was done by a 4-year-old.
Yeah,
and that's what annoyed the shit out of me.
Especially that older couple at the very end that bought the one from the DVD.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't even want that.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't find anything interesting about it. They bought it because they thought it would have value.
Yep.
Well,
we solved modern art, so that's good. We got that going for us.
I did see, I think, a YouTube video years ago about modern art and abstract art, and what it boiled down to was, the people who criticize art by saying, "Oh, that's so simple," or whatever. I could do that.
My kid could paint that.
Yeah, exactly. But the person making the video, their point was, well, yeah, you could have, but you didn't. This person did.
Yep.
Yeah.
I like to equate it to, one of my favorite bands, and maybe my favorite live band of all time, is a free jazz group in Minneapolis called Happy Apple. I know 3/5 of us have seen them many, many, many times, maybe more. But it's not pleasant music per se. Like it is challenging.
It's not easy music. I would say it's not easy.
Thank you. Yes, that is a good call. It's not easy music. And I love telling people the story of I fell asleep at one of their shows once because they were in the middle of a 35-minute song called A Drone for Bruiser Reynolds. And it was that. It was a great song, but it was 35 minutes long. And part of that experience of seeing them live and seeing that song was the fatigue that you feel. And you have to take everything into account when you're approaching art, like the drive that you took there, like what you saw coming into the gallery, right? It's like all these things. And it's so easy to lose that when you're looking at it at a distance. And this distance is on a television or through a documentarian lens or something like that. But I always like to read things through the happy apple lens or filter when I think about, stuff that I don't understand, which is like, if a lot of people listen to that and had that same experience, they'd be like, this is dumb. Why am I listening to this? And I was like, it was great. So I like to try to keep that perspective as much as I can.
So they're like the Igor Stravinsky of jazz.
Yeah. I mean, it's close. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's melodic mostly, but it is a lot. It is a lot. And they're so good.
It reminds me of Low back up in Duluth. They did a lot of that kind of stuff too.
I could see that.
They did a live show once that I went to, and they didn't tell anybody what they were going to do. And they ended up, the live show was one song, and it was 45 minutes long, and people were so pissed that that's what they did. And then there were people that were just like, yeah, Low's the best. But yeah, it's all of this goes back to that cliche that art is in the eye of the beholder, and there is somebody that is going to connect with it.
Yeah. Well put. So let's talk a little bit about the documentary itself and the style that is used. This was a bit of a divisive topic for us here. Lee, why don't you tell us how you feel, and then I'll tell you why you're wrong. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, tell us what you feel.
I was a little off-put by the documentarian putting himself in the story because it felt a little self-serving to me. But I do understand kind of why he did it, because he was going in expecting to do one thing, and then there was a part of the story that kind of threw him off track. He talks about how it affects him and how he's sort of struggling with it emotionally, but which, I mean, he's a storyteller, so he's probably going to be affected by what happens. But at the same time, I was kind of like, I don't care what you think. I want to know what everybody you're talking to thinks and what they're feeling. But it is what it is. I get why he did it, but at the same time, I was kind of like, I don't like it when documentarians get way too involved in their own stories.
Yeah, I absolutely think that's a fair call out. I would agree with you with that. There's something about having a singular vision and, being the person that owns that vision. And I think documentarians are some of the people that is a more direct line than even like the most auteuristic directors, the Kubricks, the Uzos, the whatever. Like, that from a documentary perspective, people go see Errol Morris or Michael Moore. God, am I saying that right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry. It was really weird. I think I was thinking Michael Myers in my head, and I was like, that's not who I was thinking of. Thank you. Michael Moore. They go see their documentaries because it's their documentaries as much as someone goes sees a Spielberg or a what have you, a Scorsese, right? So there's something about that. But I also agree that there needs to be a balance of the two. I think the crux of my position was that I appreciated the documentarian putting himself in there, and I think the crux of how we look at it differently is you made a note earlier that you were kind of like, this documentary is fine at first, and then when it kind of got revved up a little bit in the scandal side of things, that was more exciting to you. And I had the opposite reaction to the documentary, which is when it first started, when it was kind of focusing on the process and the kid, and there were some investigative pieces to it. I found that really interesting. And then when it kind of hit the scandal part and trying to be like figuring out if it is real, I lost interest in it. So I had kind of the opposite spectrum, if you will, the opposite feeling of it. And so him inserting himself in there to me was interesting because it was changing the dialogue. It wasn't a scandal focused thing. It was, what is the right thing to do as a documentarian in this case? Like, how involved do I be? How detached do I be? How do I get the information I need? Is it right for me to be here still? Right. So like, those are all very interesting questions. And that was more interesting to me than the scandal, right? So like, is she actually painting it? I could care less if she was actually painting it. I know why they went there. I get it. That just didn't engage me as a viewer in that. But suddenly him sort of saying, I don't know what the right thing to do here. That was interesting to me because it was like, if I was in his shoes, I would think the same things, or I wouldn't know quite what to do. So that I just appreciated it for that reason.
I also liked that. Well, I guess like is the wrong word. I found it interesting that you could tell by the way that the documentary ultimately ended up, how it was built and the end product. You could tell what he thought, like where he ended up on that line. And I think that if he had thought the opposite, if he had thought that they were in the clear and this was Marla 100%, I think the documentary itself would have been cut and edited very differently.
Yeah.
And to be fair, that I think it's a journalist that he interviews throughout the documentary. She addresses him directly about it, and she's like, I don't know what you're going to do with this information. So she does kind of pull him into it.
Yeah, she's the best voice in the whole thing, I think.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I agree.
Was that the local paper, or was that the New York Times journalist? I don't recall.
No,
I think
that
it
was the local
paper.
paper.
Yeah, she was awesome. I really liked her.
Yeah, I felt the documentary and actually the whole scene where he's having his little monologue while he was driving felt very masturbatory to me. It's like, dude, come on. This movie isn't about you. Stop trying to be like, oh, I'm so conflicted. I don't know because I agree with Jared totally. The way this thing was edited, you made your opinion very clear. I noted at one time that the music that he chose to underscore some footage of Marla painting, I think was when she's like painting in the backyard. And it's very like, if you took the music out of it, it's just this little girl painting in the backyard. But the music that he chose to undercut it is this very tense sort of minor key-ish stuff to make you, the emotions that it makes you feel is like something bad is coming, So all of a sudden it completely changes the perspective of this scene from being just footage of a little girl painting to, oh no. And like, okay, that's it. That's just an editing choice. That's completely an editing choice. And so by doing that, yeah, I think he made his stand.
And the end of that scene, like she's painting and everything's happy and she's enjoying herself. She's having a great time as a kid painting, and then she's done. I have finished this painting. I'm finished. I'm walking away, and the camera follows her away, and then like that dark music, and then it's like back to the painting.
Look at this piece of crap painting.
Right. This is a 4-year-old's painting. This isn't a genius at all. Like, it's so blatant and just sort of unfortunate.
Yeah, agreed. Mark, you had a note here about the 60 Minutes coverage that we didn't get a chance to get to when we were kind of talking about modern art, and I don't want to go past that. So what
Did I ever?
Yes, indeed. Fire away.
Boy, that coverage sucked. That made me crazy. That first of all, for people who haven't seen the documentary, the show 60 Minutes did their segment about Marla's painting, and this was the thing that initially cast all the doubt onto whether or not Marla actually painted her paintings or completed them, or basically whether or not they were authentic. And I was very upset that they brought in exactly one expert who was an expert in child development, which is relevant, but never asked any questions about art, actually. And I think the ideal expert to bring in is me.
Agreed.
Because I have experience with child development and with art, and I happen to be a parent too. Currently, a parent of a toddler who likes to paint. And I'll tell you this: that when we give her watercolor or finger paints, which are made of tempera, it looks like a child's painting. But she eventually started asking to play with Mama's special paints, and these are artist grade acrylics, and the result was completely different. It was she's made several paintings with these acrylics, and some of them are really quite beautiful. I mean, I'm not going to try to get her painting on the big scale and show her in a gallery like Marla did, but the difference in materials meant for a child and materials meant for a professional is pretty astounding. Now, when you use good materials, you have a much better chance of getting good results, and this is the case with paint. That finger paints, it's very difficult to make something look really good, and honestly, it's because they're not meant for that. They're meant for the tactile experience. When you use paints that are meant for making good-looking things, well, hey, you might get good-looking things. It's going to be easier to do that. So yeah, my 3-year-old happens to make paintings that I think are really pretty good. And that's a question they didn't ask on 60 Minutes is, what was Marla painting with? They just talked about how she was painting, which was, she's slowly pushing around paint, which is something that a 4-year-old would do. But, never got into materials and never got into the effects that they can have. So,
could you tell, Mark, based on the film, could you tell what she was using to paint with?
Yes, she was using acrylics.
So professional grade paints?
Artist grade.
Artist grade yeah.
Paints?
And I believe they were made by Liquitex.
Yep, Liquitex Basics.
Mark, I'm surprised that we haven't asked this yet, but what is your sort of opinion of Marla? Like, where would you end up if you were the expert that they consulted?
I totally accept that she made those paintings.
Cool.
And actually, I think the one observation by the 60 Minutes expert was spot on. Is that the only difference between Marla and other kids painting was that she had the endurance to paint for a long time. And maybe that's maybe that's because her dad encouraged her. I think that probably is a factor, but yeah, she filled up big canvases and happened to do it with nice paints. I think that's all you need. I totally accept that Marla made those paintings start to finish.
I do too. I think the 60 Minutes thing was just, I hate when news organizations like blindside people with stuff like that, because the family obviously didn't know that that's where the story was going. Like, they were going to be questioned about that. Like, that took them completely by surprise.
Yeah.
I don't like it when news organizations do that.
Good addition, Mark. Thank you. I appreciate you coming back to that.
Yeah.
All right. So finally, we will do our rating of the documentary. As usual, 1 being the worst documentary you've ever seen, 10 being the greatest documentary you've ever seen, in the scale of your choosing. Mark, this was in your world. This was your choice. We'll start with you. What is your rating and scale for the film?
I rather like the film. I don't think it's the best documentary I've ever seen. Oh, excuse me, documentary. But I do like it. I'm going to give it 7.8 out of 10 bitter gallery owners.
Nice. Confused gallery owners, disgruntled gallery owners, all of the above. Lee, on to you. What was your rating and scale for the film?
I enjoyed it to a certain degree. I thought it was an interesting story, and I'm very much into art myself, so I did appreciate some of the things that I saw in it. So I will give it 7 out of 10 tubes of Liquitex Basics.
How much does one of those tubes cost, would you say?
Like $4.
Oh, okay. Got it. So like a painting wouldn't cost like several $100s to make or something. It's not
no,
like, okay.
No.
Got it. Jeremy, how about you? What is your rating and scale?
I really liked the content of this documentary. I liked the story of it. I didn't necessarily think that the way that it was built was super great. Like Mark said, there are much better documentaries out there. I thought the style of it was just okay, but I really liked the content of it. I'm going to give it 6.7 pretentious art buyers.
Nice. Good call. I totally forgot to go. I feel like this was a confused documentary kind of on purpose. Some of that made it very interesting. Some of it made it a lesser kind of documentary. But I enjoyed it overall. So I would give it 6.4 masturbatory monologues. Andy, what you got?
You wixed me.
Did I? Oh, no. You're welcome.
Oh, it's great. I never thought I'd be wixed by masturbatory monologues. And yet here we are.
Here we are.
2020, ladies and gentlemen. I very much, if I could rate our discussion of this episode, I would give that 10 out of 10.
Yeah,
'Cause
agreed.
I really liked this discussion. However, we're rating the documentary, which I did not enjoy. So I'm going to go, I'll just go right down the middle. I'm going to give it 5 out of 10 Little Brothers.
Yeah, I was thinking about the little brother.
Aw.
That was my other thing. Was like, I want to see a Zane movie. I like
Yeah.
Zane.
Zane was cool.
Zane was cool. Yeah, I want to
I
see
bet
what he's
Zane
doing.
is an awesome high schooler or middle schooler or whatever he is now.
Yeah.
Like, I bet he's just a killer kid.
Yeah.
Those two kids, especially for like all the late nights, and my wife and I both looked at each other. We're like, God, those kids are getting sleep deprived. Like they were pretty chill kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I like when Marla admitted that, like, yeah, Zane painted one of my paintings.
Yeah.
And the dad's like, oh, you're tired. Shut up. Oh, man. Very good. Well, thanks, gents. Yeah, Andy, I agree with you. I thought that was a really good discussion. And Mark, thank you for bringing this to our attention. Who's up next? Who wants to do the next documentary?
Andy, you want a paper, rock, scissors for it?
I'll paper rock scissors for you.
Okay. Ready?
Okay. Are we like 1, 2, 3, shoot?
Yep.
Okay. Ready?
Yep.
Go. 1, 2,
1,
3,
2,
3.
3, shoot.
What'd you get?
I did scissors.
I got rock.
Yeah.
All right. Andy's up.
That's not suspect at all. Works every time.
That didn't sound like rock.
You mean that flat slap of my hand didn't sound like a rock to you? What are you talking about?
Are you being honest?
Are you?
Yes, I did scissors.
Fine, go ahead.
No, I want to do a podcast that is awkward paper, rock, scissors. Oh, my God. That's so good.
It would have worked too if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
Yeah, seriously.
Go ahead,
There's a
Jared.
distinctly different sound between and.
It was a very flat rock, okay?
It was a skipper, okay?
It was a
Skipping rocks.
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah. So I'll go next. Is any of this going to make the final cut?
No, I would start fresh. I'll probably tack it at
come
the end.
on.
I'll tack it at the end,
Damn.
I think.
Yeah, I will go next. My documentary is one of my favorite documentaries of all time. It probably is my favorite if I really had to choose one. And part of the reason is because I have met the main character in it. And it's just a great story. And it is called The King of Kong, A Fistful of Quarters. It was made in 2007, and it is largely based around competitive arcade gaming and the story of two people, Steve Wiebe and Billy Mitchell, and their attempt to break the King Kong scoring record that year.
So good.
It is not only a great documentary, I believe it is one of the best films to come out in 2007.
Wow.
Isn't that on Netflix or Amazon or something? I
It
feel
has,
like
it has been back and forth on many platforms. I don't know what it is on right now,
Yeah,
or
I'll
if
just
it's on anything.
see if we can
but
find it.
It is the hero's journey, and it is one of the best movie villains of all time, and it's just so good. And I am excited that most of you have not seen it before.
This is correct.
Lee, have you seen it?
I have not.
Mark?
I think it's just you and I, Kyle.
Okay. Sweet. I'm excited. It's been a long time since I've seen it, so it is by no means fresh in my brain, but I'm excited to rewatch it. All right, so to wrap up here, Remaker's Mark is a proud member of the Math is Hard network. To find out more information about this podcast or any other podcasts on the network, check us out at mathishard.net. There you will find show notes with links to all of the people, movies, and links discussed in this episode. This information is also attached to the show file in the podcast client of your choice. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review Remaker's Mark, which would mean the world to us. And now we are also on YouTube. Search for Remaker's Mark. We are on Facebook at Remaker's Mark, Twitter at Remaker's Mark, and Instagram at Remaker's Mark Podcast. So please join in the discussion there as well. So this was really good, guys. Again, I'm really glad that we solved modern art. We got that figured out. Let's get some finger paints out and make some masterpieces. Make a few bucks. Lord knows podcasting isn't doing it for us.
Yeah, honestly, one of the things that this documentary did is made me want to just try painting.
Yeah, totally.
Do it.
Please do.
And I'm terrible at painting, but it made me want to just experiment with color and just mess around.
Totally. It's been so inspiring seeing you do that, Lee, and the journey that you've gone on. How long have you been doing that now?
About a year and a half.
Man, that's so cool. Like you just decided that you wanted to get into it and try it, and you did.
Yeah.
And you just keep doing it. It's so great. I just love to see it. So thank you for showing us that as well.
I have, when the quarantine first started, I bought all the stuff that I needed to paint my Dungeons and Dragons miniatures.
Nice.
And it is sitting in a pile, unused to this day, 6 months later. And I really just need to commit to a day of setting it all up. And just starting to try and going through it.
Yep. Here's to making mistakes. It's most of the fun. All right, gents. Well, until the next time, may the force be with you.
And also
with you. Sorry.
Nailed it.